What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Mcreator tutorial, and today we're going to be showing you, as I'm sure you saw from the thumbnail and the title, how to make berry bushes. Now, I'm not going to walk you through setting up a new workspace or any of the stuff here. If you are unfamiliar with Mcreator and would like a little rundown on what all of these things mean, just go back and watch my first video. You should see it up in the iCards right now. You just have to watch the first few minutes where I cover all of this stuff and you should be good to go. But starting off for today, our first step, as always, is going to be creating new texture files. And I thought it might be interesting to show you guys how you can pull the default berry bush textures from Minecraft off of your computer so that you can work from them and really make sure that your bushes feel like they belong in the game of Minecraft by making them look as similar as possible. The first thing you want to do is come down here and search %appdata%. From there, go in the .minecraft folder, go in saves, go into versions, find whichever version you want to pull the texture from. I would recommend the most recent version that you have played on. Do note, if you haven't played on that version, such as I have never played 1.21.1, at least not the Java version, then you'll only see this JSON file. This is actually missing a file. But when I go into 1.21.3, which I have played, you'll notice it's also got this executable jar. If you've got a program like WinRAR or 7-zip installed, you should be able to right click on this and open with WinRAR or 7-zip. From here you need to go to Assets. From here you need to go to Assets, Minecraft, Textures, and here is all of the texture files in the game. We're going to start by going into Items, and right here is our Sweet Berries PNG. We can go ahead and drag and drop it into here and click that it is an item, and now we have Sweet Berry item texture. It might give you this WinRAR diagnostic operation failed report from WinRAR, but that's just an error on WinRAR's part. It did succeed, so you can go ahead and close that. Let's go back into our texture files and go into the block files. And you'll notice right here, we have Sweet Berry Bush stage 0 all the way up to stage 3. We can go ahead and click drag and drop, block. It looks like it wouldn't let me drag and drop all of them at once, but feel free to just drag them and drop them one at a time. And just like that, we now have all of the textures for our Sweet Berry Bush as well as our sweet berries themselves. I'm going to go ahead and open these textures and pretty much color match these colors, but change them to something like dark blue or dark red. So we've officially color matched and changed all of our bush textures and our berry bush item, so we can officially start adding some new things to the mod. I'm going to start, of course, by adding a folder called Bitter Berry Bush. I do recommend that you do this just to keep all the various things in your mod organized from the jump. It makes it a lot easier once you have a ton of things instead of trying to sort them all then. So let's go in the folder here and add a new item called Bitter Berries. Select our Bitter Berries texture. In properties, Bitter Berries is fine, common. Add them to the food tab here, and the rest of this is good to go. Remember, these two down here technically need to be changed, but once we go into food properties and check enable, if we come back to regular properties, it will automatically update them to eating with the use of 32, which is your standard and what we want in this case. I'm not going to mess around with the nutritional value or the saturation because you can set this to whatever you like. It really doesn't matter. So 4 and 0.3 is fine for us. It doesn't need any advanced properties or triggers, so we are good to go. Go ahead and do the same, but this time add a block and call it Bitter Berry Bush stage 0. Up here, you're going to want to change it from a normal texture to a cross model and select your bush stage 0. Now do note that this is a cutout texture that has transparent parts. I see no reason to give it any rotation, although technically you could give it a y-axis rotation from player side or block face, although I think player side makes a little bit more sense than block face if you're gonna do that. And maybe you'll want to give it a dependent biome tint, but for now, and at least with the way default vanilla berry bushes work, we should be good to go. Come in here to properties and get rid of the stage 0 on the end here. This is going to make it so that if you ever play your mod with things like JEI, or excuse me, If you ever play your mod with things like Jade, then when you look at the berry bush, it will accurately tell you what it is. It won't say stage 0, stage 1, and it'll be a little bit more straightforward this way. Keep in mind that these berry bushes should not have any creative inventory tabs, and they have a hardness and blast resistance of 0. You can walk through them, although they should damage you when you do, so we will have to add that functionality. And as far as the sound set goes, there are sounds for the sweet berry bush, so let's go ahead and just use those. And because it doesn't drop anything until it is at full grown, we're going to change the drop amount to 0, and we're going to change the creative pick item to the bitter berries. This should all be good. If we go to advanced properties, we are going to want it to tick randomly, and we can make the block color on the map a plant, make it so that when it is pushed by a piston, it is destroyed. And as far as I'm aware, the rest of this can all just stay the same, unless you want to change the AI path node type to be open danger or damage cautious or something like that, because technically they will get damaged from it. I don't know the difference between damage other, danger other, or anything like that, but I guess you could easily block it off, or I'm personally going to put it at damage cautious. If you wanted to, you could also give it a random XZ offset so that it's never centered on the block and instead placed kind of randomly the way flowers are. I think that could be pretty interesting for your berry bush, although vanilla berry bushes are not done this way, so we're going to leave it like this. It is going to be bone mealed eventually, and we are going to have to import our bone meal procedures here, but for now, let's go ahead and leave those empty. We don't have to mess with entity, fluid or storage, triggers for now, or generation for now, so let's go ahead and save the mod element and duplicate it to get all 4 versions in. Now this is stage 2. This stage will technically drop berry bushes, or should drop berry bushes when destroyed, so we're going to use a custom loot table because it's never a guaranteed amount. It's anywhere between 1 or 2, so loot table it is for stage 2 and stage 3. Alright, now let's make it so that whenever any of these tick, they have a chance of progressing to the next growth stage. And actually, while we're at it, we can open this final one, go to advanced properties, and make it so that it does not tick, because there is no growth stage after this. It doesn't need to tick itself. It's also not going to be bone mealable. So in order to do that, let's go into our berry bushes, click on triggers, on tick update, and add a new procedure. This is going to be called bitter berry bush. It's going to apply to all stages, so this is inaccurate. And then I don't need the on, it's redundant. So berry bush tick update. There we go. Create procedure. Actually, real quick before we jump to the bush tick update, here's something I forgot to mention with these is if you are using the block states plugin, then you can easily just create one berry bush item and then add various block states for it to represent this version, and this version. I actually would recommend that if you have this plugin installed and feel like using it, but if you do not have it installed, then you can just do things exactly how we've done them here and you should be fine. So this is our berry bush tick update procedure. The first thing we are doing is checking that the block above us is not solid, as that is the first check that it does, and the other check that it does is verify that the light level is at least 9 or greater, and if that is the case, then it will set a random number to ran, and then if that random number is less than 0.07 or a 7% chance of growth successfully. And then what we're doing here is just checking to see which version of the bush we are on, tier 0, tier 1, or tier 2, and then incrementing up into the next stage. Go ahead and save that. Make sure that it is in the on tick update procedure for all of your berry bushes here. All of them except the very last one here, of course. Now it's at this point that you really should probably launch the game and test things out. That is definitely going to be best practice, but I feel like I know what I'm doing, even though I've proven time and time again that I don't, and I'm just gonna keep working and hope that everything is working properly. I highly recommend you don't do this and you just go ahead and launch the game real quick, make sure it's working as intended. If you do that, you'll probably find some issues that I'm about to gloss right over and fix later, but yeah, we're not going to because I'm feeling lazy. Now, unlike our crops, our berry bushes are actually going to succeed every time we try and bone meal them. So we do not need a bone meal success condition. We just need an on bone meal success procedure. This is going to be dependent on which stage we are on. So we can just remove this here, and it's now bitter berry bush stage 0 bone meal success. At this stage, all we need to do is progress to the next one. Do that again for stage 1 and again for stage 2. And next we need loot tables for our 2 biggest berry bush states. So let's come over here and add a new loot table called bitter berry bush stage 2 loot table. Cut the loot table off the end of the text here, so it's just bitter berry bush stage 2, the exact same as its name up here. It is a mod, a namespace, and it is also a block table type. Add our bitter berries here. This is just stage 2, so it's only going to be able to drop 1 to 2, and it is indeed affected by fortune, ignoring silk touch. So let's go ahead and save this mod element, and we should be good to go. And we need to do another one for our stage 3. The stage 3 drops 2 to 3 and is also affected by fortune, so this should also be good to go because I've cut the loot table part off here. It is mod and it is block, so we are good to go. And last but not least, we need to add a procedure that calls these loot tables whenever these bushes are right clicked on. So let's open up this one right here, go to triggers and add an on block right clicked. We can delete the on part, but the stage 2 part is important. Go ahead and create that procedure. Alright, so this should pretty much do it for our berry bush stage right clicked procedure. It's basically just going to execute the command that summons the loot table, or at least loot from the loot table. And then right here, it's going to play the sweet berry pick sound and then reduce the stage back to stage 1. Note that that's not stage 0, but that is stage 1. The one that it would normally be reverted back to if they were sweet berries and were picked. I'm actually going to go ahead and duplicate that because it's pretty much identical to what we need for our next stage. Come over here and just change the end of this command from stage 2 to stage 3, and we should be good. And now the only thing we still need to code is being able to plant these bushes using the bitter berries themselves, and then of course having them generate naturally in the open world so that we can find them. But before we do any of that, let's go ahead and test what we've done so far. So I'm actually only just realizing we actually have no way of acquiring the sweet berry bush and testing it because it doesn't exist anywhere yet and we can't plant it naturally, but we can run a few tests on the, did I say sweet berry? I meant bitter berry bushes, but we can run a few tests on the sweet berry bush just to make sure that the way we code our bitter berries is the exact same as the sweet berries. So what do I mean by that? Well, I mean this. If I click on the side of this dirt block here, do you think the sweet berry bush will place on top of it or on this one next to it? Or will it do nothing? Let's go ahead and find out. It places next to it. So clearly the triggered space that it's trying to grow in has nothing to do with the block it's actually touching, but instead the airspace in which I am clicking. That's going to be something incredibly important. You'll also probably notice that the bounding box here is slightly off. We did not change our bounding boxes at all, so we are going to have to adjust that. In fact, let me go ahead and take a look at that. It looks like it comes in by 3 pixels on each side and only goes up by about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I'm going to guess 7. So we're going to come back to our first bush here, go to bounding box and cut 3 off of each of these to make this 13. Bring this up 3, bring this up 3, and make this one 13. And then drop this down to 7. And that should pretty much mirror our vanilla berry bush. When we bone meal it, it does indeed grow. It looks like this one only comes in by 1 on each side and is the same height as a full-grown block. So let's come into our second berry bush here, go to bounding box, change this to 15, this to 15, this to 1, and this to 1, and that should be good there. And it seems like the next growth stage is the same, and the final one is a full block. So this one's good to go, but this one right here also needs to have its bounding box changed to be 15, 15, 1, and 1. So with that information, let's go into our bitter berries here, go under triggers, and then when right clicked, block position. Now the first thing we're actually going to have to do here is determine the direction of the block face that was clicked, or the trigger face. So what we need is we need this if trigger direction or face equals down. And this is we're going to need this for every single direction. So we're actually going to need 6 else ifs on this else if chain. And then we need to change this to up, this to north, this to south, this to west, and this to east. Now we are determining which direction we have activated our trigger face on. Next, we need to determine if there is air at the associated block. So if the trigger direction is down, then we are clicking on the bottom of a block, which means we need to check below said block for air. And if there is air there, then we need to check below that block, which would be the equivalence of y-2, and see if that is a berry bush compatible growing block. Now that's a good number of various blocks, such as podzol, dirt, grass, I believe even coarse dirt, maybe gravel, I don't remember entirely, but there is a good number of blocks that would be valid to have our sweet berries grow on. So the best way to make sure that we can know any of them is by adding our own tag. So we're going to add a common tag called Minecraft Dirt. We don't need to add Minecraft logs, just Minecraft Dirt right here, and add tags. I'm not sure why it automatically added this biome tag here, but we don't need it, so we can go ahead and delete that. And then it does not automatically populate this tag with its default values, but that's what we're going to go ahead and do. Now this is dirt, coarse dirt, podzol, and rooted dirt, as well as mud and muddy mangrove roots, grass, and mycelium, and a moss block. All of these are what are tagged as dirt in default Minecraft, these 9 different blocks. However, berry bushes can grow not only on all 9 of these blocks, but also farmland. So what we've done here is checked not only that there is air at the corresponding block, but we can go ahead and get rid of these. We are also checking that underneath the block that we are trying to plant on is either tagged as dirt or tagged as farmland. Well, I say tagged as farmland, but I mean just farmland. If your mod has multiple different types of farmland, you can easily use a farmland tag here and it would work the same. Or you could create your own tag for berry bushes that includes everything from dirt plus all of your farmland, and that would probably be the most straightforward way to do it. But for just adding bushes, this works just fine. So one more time, what we're doing when we click the bottom of a block, we check that the block under that block is air, and then the block under that air is placeable, or that our bush can sustain on it, and then we will officially plant our block. Make sure that you are planting it wherever the air is, and make sure that you are planting the basic stage. But from that is pretty much it. Now we need to do it again over here, but this is up. So instead of y-1, we do y+1. And then we can check that the basic block, the block that we have clicked, is sustainable. Now our trigger face up is done, and we're going to have to do the same for north, south, east, and west, or west and east. Now the numbering, the add minus might get a little bit crazy and silly, so let me just fill this out real quick and then you can take a look at it and see which numbers need added and subtracted to for each one. Alrighty, so starting here with north and south. North and south run along the z-axis, north being in the negative z direction and south being in the positive z direction. So what we're doing here is we are checking when we click on the north face that the negative z direction is air, and then the block below that negative z direction is tagged as sustainable for our bush, and then we are placing our bush where the air was. We do the same thing for south, but south is in the positive z, so I've just flipped around all the signs here, except for this one because we are of course still checking under our plant, not over our plant. So flipped all the z symbols, and then I went to west, and west and east runs in the x axis. So instead of z, these are all in the x. west is negative, and east is positive. So I hope that all makes sense, but we're basically checking, and this should allow us to properly plant our berry bushes. It is indeed in our bitter berries here when right-clicked on block, so we can go ahead and save that, and in theory we should now be able to plant and test our bitter berries. Alright, so here we are. I'm going to go ahead and place a grass block up here in the sky, just so that we can test it from every direction. So let me place on the bottom of it, and sure enough, it does grow. Now, if I place a slab there or something that is not a full block so I can still see and have access to that underside, it's still not planting because this is not a full block. Now, if I go to the sides here, it's also not planting because the block under it is not sustainable for berry bushes. So let's place grass here and then test on all four sides that everything is working properly. We can also probably verify and say that our height here is a little bit short and it needs to go up to 8 pixels instead of 7. So we can do that very simply right here by going into the bounding box and bringing this up to 8. Save, and that's been fixed. And then also just make sure that we can plant on top here, and there we go. You'll notice that we can still walk through our berry bushes, so that's something that we're going to have to add, because usually it should slow us down and hurt us. But can we bone meal them? Let's go ahead and right click here, right click again, right click again. So it would appear that we are unable to bone meal this version to its full grown version because it counts as a right click. So the game is pulling our right click trigger instead of pulling our bone meal procedure. So there's probably something we can do about that. Let me take a look. Here we are in our bitter berry bush stage 2 right clicked procedure, and I think all we need to do is verify that the item in the main hand is not bone meal. So in theory this should be enough, but in Java Edition, the offhand also works as long as there is nothing in the main hand, so we do need some additional code here. So there we go. If the item in the main hand is bone meal, or the item in the offhand is bone meal and the main hand is empty, and then we add a not, so if this is not the case, then we execute this command here, but if it is, we do nothing, and hopefully this will allow our bone meal trigger to run instead. Alrighty, I believe we now have it working as best we can. So when we place the bitter berries there and then bone meal them, it works. And when we click this stage, it swings the main hand instead of the offhand. But other than that, it does seem to work all the same. And then we right click that and boom. So it goes like this and no problems. It seems to be working just fine. Now, it does swing the main hand of here, but as far as I can tell, it shouldn't. And I will also say that the spread of those particles doesn't seem to be very good. So what I've done here is I am detecting when we can simulate it. I've dropped the not here, and whenever we do this, I'm just brute forcing this. Originally, I had it so that it just called the bone meal procedure, which technically does work, but then we don't see things like the particles and we don't hear the sound, so it's very weird. I'm actually going to increase the area that these particles spawn in from 0.1 to 0.25. I think that is going to be more realistic. And I think 20 particles is spot on. Now you can see that I had this procedure in here as well for if it was in the offhand to swing the offhand instead of the main hand, but this doesn't seem to be working, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. But this should be good. Call the bone meal success procedure. That's going to save us some code in this procedure. Then play the bone meal use sound and then spawn in particles at the center of the block in an area of 0.25 with speed 0.1 of villager happy, and that simulates a successful bone meal condition. So with that, our bushes are pretty much good to go, except for this, which is pretty much the last thing we had to fix in the last version, or the last tutorial as well. So let's go ahead and make it so that whenever the neighbor blocks change, it will destroy itself if it's no longer on a valid block, and it will also generate themselves naturally in taiga biomes the same way that sweet berries do. Let's go into our berry bush here, go to triggers, and add a neighbor block change. This is going to apply to all of them, so we don't need to worry about this. Bitter berry bush neighbor block changes. Go ahead and create that procedure. Okay, and I believe this should cover it. Whenever the neighbor block changes, we are detecting if there is still a dirt block or a farmland block below it, and if not, then we are detecting if we are stage 2 or stage 3. If we are stage 2, we will call the proper loot, and if we are stage 3, we will call the proper loot, and then we will remove the block and spawn the break particles. So this should be working just fine. We just need to make sure that that is a neighbor block changes for every single one of our sweet berry bushes. And you know, I keep calling these sweet berry bushes, they're bitter berry bushes. I guess I should just call them bushes or berry bushes, and that would prevent confusion, but I don't know. And next up, we need to make them generate naturally in the wild. So instead of going into any of these bushes and clicking generation, this really only works for ores and other like stone type things generate within the earth. I would highly recommend not using it for natural things like bushes. Instead, you can add a feature, which is one of the elements right here. We're going to call this a bitter berry bush feature, and it's going to generate with vegetal decoration. Let's restrict this biomes to anything labeled taiga, except the snowy taiga. So you can see there are an absolute ton of different types of features here. Some of them I am familiar with, some of them I am not familiar with. If you want tutorials or how-tos on any of them specifically, I might do that. Like I said, I'm not familiar with all of them, so it might require some testing on my part, but what we're looking for right now is this patch feature, and we want that with the full-grown berry bush block. Is air at current position is vital, but it's not the only condition we want to meet. We need all conditions are met, and is air is only the first one. The next one is making sure that the block below it, or the block that position offset by Y1, has a solid face on the up side. Number of tries 128, 7, and 3 is totally fine. That will pretty much mirror what the sweet berries look like. And we want this on height map motion blocking, not world gen motion blocking well after world gen, because we are generating with vegetal decoration, and world gen is pretty much way up here at raw gen. So there's going to be a bunch of other things already on the surface layer, so this is very important. I would recommend putting a chance of 1 in 12. That's going to make it really feel like sweet berries. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit too common. And I'm not sure that it works because it doesn't seem to matter when I add this or not add it, but I always like to add only if sweet berries would survive at that position, because that's what we're mimicking anyway. So in theory, this should also help, but I've never actually seen anything change with generation when I add this or remove it, but I like to add it just in case. This should be everything we need for this feature, so we can go ahead and save it and launch the game, and we should be able to find our bitterberry bushes out in the wild. Alright, here we are at the nearest taiga biome, and yeah, here we go. I say we shouldn't have to fly around for too long, and we've already found our bitter berries. So maybe they're spawning a little bit too frequently, maybe they aren't. This could be the average sized batch, it could be a small sized batch, but it could be a really large sized batch. So it's hard to say without flying around and looking at it more, but I'm very happy with this, and you can actually compare this to the size of this sweet berry patch over here, and you'll notice it's actually pretty much the same, more or less the same. Maybe this one's a little bit more frequent, but if we right click, everything seems to be working and sounding just the same. If we destroy it, oh, that's a good catch. Oh, we are in creative mode. Let's go back to survival mode and make sure that we get loot. Yeah, we do indeed get loot if we destroy it in survival mode, so that is all good. Oh yeah, we still need to slow ourselves down while walking through them, so that's a really good catch. But as far as I'm aware, I would say that that is everything else working properly. Oh, whoa, that was weird. Let me try that one more time. Whoa. Oh my gosh, we're an idiot. I'm sure most of you saw it, but I forgot to do Y-1 here. That's why I've been bashing my head against the wall trying to figure out why this isn't working. Keep changing things. But yeah, this should finally be correct, and if it's not, I guess I'm just gonna cry. We can also go ahead and put in when entity collides in block trigger, and that should allow us to be slowed. Let me pull out the stage 0 because it's gonna be applied to all of them. So essentially all we need to do for that is make it so that whenever there's an entity in the bush, it will attempt to override the motion vector to whatever the motion vector already is in that direction. So x delta movement of the entity times 0.33. Now, it's been a while since I've added these bushes, but I believe, if I am not mistaken, 0.33 is roughly what these sweet berry bushes reduce your speed by. And then we also need to damage them with 1 tick of damage from source sweet berry bush. Alright, I actually did some play testing, and I've determined that it's better if it's at 0.25 instead of 0.33, and we also want this condition here. So if it is not a fox and it is not an item, then we apply this slowness and this damage. The reason being because foxes are not actually slowed down by sweet berry bushes, so I figured we'd make it the same for our bitter berry bushes. And if we don't have this item thing here, if you throw, say, a diamond or a netherite or an emerald at the sweet berry bush, it's going to deal 1 damage to it, and it's going to destroy it, and it's going to be gone forever. So making sure that items are not destroyed and damaged is also very important, but this should pretty much do it, and we need to make sure that that is applied in the entity collides triggers of every single one of our bushes. Okay, finally we've gotten it where nothing seems to be breaking it, unless of course I actually destroy the block underneath of it, which is absolutely perfect. And if I go and try and walk through it, it does indeed slow me down, and I think that's roughly the same slowdown as we get from the sweet berries, but we can easily come over here and set up a bit of a track and try and test them. So that side is, oh, we also kind of want a sound for when we place them. We can add that as well. But let's test this. When I try and sprint through here, I'm moving at, pretty slow speeds. And when I try and sprint through here, I'd say it's pretty much the same. I don't really feel a difference going from one to the other, so I think that's the same. Let's set the random tick speed to 300 real quick and verify that our random update tick is working, which it does not seem that it is. And this is probably what's causing that from not growing, is not block at solid here. This needs to be +1, so it's checking the block above it. And then right here, we can go ahead and add in or see the sky, because we've already verified that the other berry bushes can indeed grow at nighttime. So if they can see the sky, that should also be valid. So there we go, we are back in the world. It is nighttime and our berry bushes are growing kind of the same, or it should be pretty much exactly the same as our sweet berry bushes grew over here. So everything does seem to be working properly from that front. But I believe that's pretty much everything ready to go. Oh, except for the sounds when we plant them, but that shouldn't be too hard. All you got to do is come in here to the bitter berries, right click on block procedure, and whenever you replace the block here, just add another world action where you play the corresponding sound. So play sound, come in here, sweet berry bush place, right like that, boom. And then make sure you copy and paste this for every single one of these. You can also come into the entity collides procedure and then play hurt by sweet berry bush, which is actually something I'm only noticing just now. Entity player hurt sweet berry bush. So I'm assuming this is when they are hurt by the sweet berry bush, not when they hurt the bush itself, because that makes more sense. So I'm gonna go ahead and add this in here and then make it a block sound, and then that should pretty much be everything done and dusted for it to work the exact same as the sweet berry. So I really hope that you all enjoyed. If you have anything that you would like to see for next Monday's tutorial video, please leave it down in the comments below. And without further ado, peace out.